All right, hello everyone. Jared Couture here from Two Cities, One World Kung Fu Music Lessons, and today I'm here with the great musical master, Mr. Sid Jacobs. I had the pleasure of learning from him at Musicians Institute about 7 years ago, many classes, and Sid is truly an amazing musician and master, so I'm very, very happy to have him here. And Sid, if you don't mind, would you go ahead and just give a little brief introduction of yourself and your musical background from born until now?
Well, I was born and there's now.
All right, that was brief. You did what I asked. A little more. What else?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what
Just your
how
musical
to even
background.
begin, but
Yeah.
you know, so I was born in Miami Beach. If that's significant at all, I have no idea. But my family moved to Cuba. I left there when I was 5 because there was a revolution. I don't know if you heard about it. It was before your time. But, so we moved back to Miami, and I was, I think I was very fortunate because Miami had a really fertile scene at the time that I was growing up. The guitarist Joe DiOrio was living there, and he was playing with Ira Sullivan, and this is the same soil that the Sprout Pat Metheny came out of, that soil, Jaco Pastorius, and of course everyone would go and gather and hear Joe DiOrio play, and Ira Sullivan was kind of the music maestro, the guru of all who gathered around the Miami jazz scene at that time, which was, I would say, that was the early 70s, and all through the 70s, even after I left. My family moved out west, so I had already decided to become a musician, and I was kind of a rabid practicer.
When did you actually begin playing? What age?
I started I started taking lessons when I was 7.
Okay.
And then a few years later, the Beatles hit the scene, and so it was cool that I played the guitar, and I had a little head start on that, and then when I was around 15, Jimi Hendrix hit the scene, and now for a 15-year-old, that's when you're starting to think about what you're going to do when you grow up, or think about self-expression. I never imagined that the guitar was that kind of vehicle of self-expression, and you, of course, his sound spoke to me and a lot of other people. So I started to take guitar more seriously, and I found out Jimmy was into jazz and he liked Wes Montgomery, so I said, well, and some of the grooves on Electric Ladyland had some jazzy kind of smoky jazz club kind of, that my imagination was telling me that, because of course at 15 I wasn't hanging out in smoky jazz clubs, I just had the reference to movies. That came later, but I was jamming along with records of Jimmy, and I was jamming along with B.B. King, and I could find where they were. But then when I tried to do that with Wes Montgomery, every time I found him, he was somewhere else. There were changes going on. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, if I really want to call myself a musician, I have to learn how to speak this language. This is a language that is that needs to be learned for a serious musician. So I was very lucky because there was a maestro, a teacher there from Connecticut, who was Joe DiOrio's teacher when he was a kid, and his name was Vincent Breedice. So there were some of us who wanted to go study with him, and I was among them, and I got to. And I thought I was doing okay by practicing a couple hours a day. I thought that was really cool. And I went into his ensemble class. It was like school had just started, so I didn't really know anybody. and I didn't know him, but he was an imposing figure. And I remember he walked in and he was very gruff. He didn't have very much patience for fools. And he said, most of you aren't going to be guitarists. Most of you aren't going to be musicians. And of course, it's a room full of guitarists. And I thought to myself, he's probably right, because, he's talking to everybody else but me. And he said, because most of you are just practicing 2 hours a day. And I went, uh-oh. I'm practicing 2 hours a day. I thought that was pretty good. And he said, think about it. People work an 8-hour day just to survive, just to, not for anything they love, just to survive. So if you're not putting in at least 8 hours, then you're not really taking music seriously. And for some reason, I've forgotten so much in my life, so much water under the bridge that I'll never see again. But that moment, because it turned a light bulb on, because I said, he's right. You can't argue with that fundamental truth. So it was like my life changed from that moment on, because I just started to kind of live a solitary life from that point on. And,
that's good.
And then years go by. So, but I only got to study with him for maybe about a year. And, but that was when you're practicing that intense, that's, that gets the fire started and the fire keeps burning. And my family moved to Las Vegas. And of course, at that time, believe it or not, I had hair down past my shoulders and could barely grow a beard. And I walked into the dean's office at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, and I said, I'd like to enroll. He said, what instrument do you play? I said, I play the guitar. He said, we have too many guitarists, get out of here. And I thought, well, that's really rude. I mean, to myself, I didn't say that to him out loud, but because, maybe you're young and aggressive, you said, what do you mean by that? It's kind of like, well, if you have too many guitarists, you obviously need more teachers. He said, now I could get a recommendation from Vince Breedice, from Joe DiOrio, who I knew back in Miami, and he was not expecting that kind of response. So he threw me off guard, because I thought he would welcome a diligent, good student, which I thought of myself as, and he just farted me off and dismissed me and very briefly, and just went back to his papers. And I was the little anger, and I had been practicing my classical pieces for a while at 8 hours a day or more. And he said, recommendations don't mean anything. You'd have to play for my guitar professor. So I found him, and to this day, I haven't played these Bach pieces flawlessly, but that day, for some reason, it just came out. I don't know if it was maybe the adrenaline or whatever chemical was involved, but I just went for it. And the professor said, how are you fingering that last passage? I'm working on that piece myself. I said, well, I'll share all my fingerings with you, but first, are you looking for a guitar teacher? He said, no, but I explained to him the situation. So we went back up, and the dean, who really turned out to be a nice guy. It was, everybody has a bad day. Everybody has bad days. But so he's sitting there very smugly going, well, and the professor said, well, hire me, he played better than I do. So I started teaching it. Now, I didn't have a degree at the time, and I still don't. But I started teaching at the university there when I was 18 as adjunct faculty. And I managed to always stay adjunct. I'm always on the periphery of everything.
Yeah, I know that story. I heard you say it, and I was so happy you just shared it because I was going to ask you to anyway. That's so
And
amazing.
so then what I realized is that I wasn't going to get instruction from a guitar teacher there. I had to find my own. And Joe Dioria had told me about this great guitarist, Don Overberg, who was working all the time. And he had been Julie London's accompanist and her guitarist. And he wrote her book, and he was her conductor. So he was, quite an advanced musician. I said, I'll just, he played with Lenny Tristano, so he had the goods. I said, that's what I want, and I figured if I went to the sources, if I went to the masters, I would get the direct information instead of someone's watered down version of whatever they were able to glean from it, which is what schools offer. When you go to school, that's what you get. You get an interpretation of someone else's interpretation. When you go to the master, you get it directly. So that, for me, has always been my education. When I wanted to learn how to write, I went to a composer.
Yeah.
When I wanted to learn how to play, I went to a great player. I found the greatest player that I could find. Now, and Don was hilarious. But it's easy to confuse an 18-year-old kid. So he asked me when I went over to his house for a lesson. Joe had told me to find him. Oh, it was just, so I called him up, and he said, well, I just had a kid. Why don't you call me in a couple months? And he says, well, okay, great, but I'll call you in a couple months. But I just got here into Las Vegas. I mean, and all I want to do is play jazz guitar. What should I do? He said, well, so you want to play jazz guitar? I said, yeah. He says, well, I think the best thing you should do is leave this town. Well, that didn't happen. I was too young to leave my parents, but I got together with him a couple months later, and he said, do you read? And I said, yeah, I can read. And so he put a Stan Getz solo in front of me, 1, 2, 1, 2, and I just was, I couldn't read that. I just was, of course, he was busting my chops. Mm. And so no sound came from me, obviously. And he said, that was real good, now a little louder. So anyway, so I learned how musicians talk to each other, because we play those kind of games all the time with each other. And anyway, but he was very kind. He took me kind of under his wing, and when he couldn't do gigs, he was always first call. And when the A list of guys couldn't do it in the B list, and the B list needed their subs, I got to, work in the pit bands of Las Vegas. And my first gig was actually, they had 2 guitars, so I was able to sit next to him and hear how to navigate your way through, your place in a big band, or your place in an orchestra, and what you're supposed to do. So I learned how to read and function, and the tricks about reading, where if you can't play, you keep counting, because whatever you do, you don't get lost. Certain things about being a professional musician, you only learn by doing. You can't learn about it. There's so much that you can't learn in school. You have to learn by experience. So for me, all my learning has been by experience. So even playing those shows and making a living was learning how to deal with playing all styles, with following the chart and trying to figure out where you fit in the mix. Particularly when there's, and this applies to everything, to a human being. If you're talking to one person and that person is a parent, you're the same person, but your frame of reference, where you where you connect with that is different than if you're speaking with 2 people. If you speak with 3 people, your function in a trio is different than your function in a quintet even, or a big band. Where you fit in the mix, whether it's daily life or whether it's the stage of music, it's the same. You find where you fit, and ideally that's what a musician does. So some of those things I learned, and then when I finally ended up in Los Angeles, MI had just started. Well, it wasn't MI, it was just GIT. And Joe DiOrio was there because he's one of the founders, and he's responsible for me getting in GIT and ultimately meeting you. And,
yeah.
Other stuff happened in there, but that's maybe the Cliff Notes version of he was born and here I am.
And now you've been teaching at MI for how long now?
Oh, well over 30 years.
So how do you consider your learning after that then? Because you're still as a teacher and a student of music yourself, but you said like you're still seeking out the best. Like, did you continue doing that at that point, and also with people at MI, or still outside? Or it's just interesting to hear you talk about only learning learning the best from playing environments as a teacher too, as the master in the school. It's kind of interesting to hear this two-side perspective.
Well, in just like right now, my teacher is the guitar. The guitar itself is because the guitar will let you know what you need to work on.
Yeah, that's cool.
Dealing with people, when people say, "Oh, how are the students at MI?" It's an unanswerable question, because it says, "How are the white people?" How can you answer that question? Everybody is different, because there's some students who are really motivated, some who are there because they're still figuring out what they want to do when they grow up, and so many things in between. So everybody is different. You can't ask that question, and you can ask the question, but it can't be answered honestly.
Mm-hmm.
You can make up something, but it's you can't answer that. It's a big unknown. It's a big variable. You can't put your finger on it.
Well, cool. I have a question about the mastery stuff then. To continue. So basically, it's just like you were saying, my program it's a Kung Fu music lesson. It's all about mastery through time and effort. And right now I do study Shaolin Kung Fu with a Shaolin monk, someone who grew up from 5 years old to 20 years old in the Shaolin temple. It's so cool. He says there, kind of like you were saying about 8-hour days, there everybody trains for at least 8 hours a day. It's 4 sets of 2 hours, but they also don't have any other obligations. They don't even make their food, and there's they're not playing around with a bunch of stuff like we are, and so much technology and so many things. So you're just in the mountains. So he says that everybody trains at least 8 hours, but still they're training 10, 12, 14 because there's nothing else to do. So the idea is, for me, is like figuring out how to create that lifestyle for myself, making sure I can play 8 hours or more a day, and helping other students find that, or create a lifestyle where we can live in these kind of times now, while still creating that lifestyle. Do you have any suggestions for setting up a lifestyle like that for yourself?
Well, the thing that stood out to me when I said it, when you said it, 8 or 10 or where, there's no magic number.
Yeah.
Because the 10 hours of unaware time, you might as well be watching TV. 8 hours of practicing scales, you might as well be doing push-ups. So you have dexterity, but if dexterity is all you want out of it, well then great. You could be a wonderful typist and make way more money. As a matter of fact, there's not a profession that you can mention that has a lower guarantee than being an artist or a musician. So the only reason to do it is because that's what you need to do. There's no reason to do that. If there's a reason to do it, then that's great. Then you do it. If it needs to be, you do the work that needs to be done. And if you do it with attention, of course, you're going to get maybe better result. But if you don't worry about the result, then you're even better off still, because you're doing it just for the purpose of doing it. There's no other reason to do it but to do it. And so if you wake up in the morning and you're thinking music, you're living music. If you're living music, even when you have, everyone has errands to do. Right. The lucky Shaolin monks, you know, they're sequestered, they're quarantined or whatever, you know, they have that life without distraction. But I don't know what's the matter with the distraction. It's, you know, it's living it. Charlie Parker, one of the great philosophers of music, said it very simply, and if you don't live it, it won't come out your horn. And I don't know that there's a more significant truth than that simple one. Because it's just that you live it. So it's not like it's, 2 hours or 3 hours or 5 hours, or I've got to do these push-ups, I got to do these scales, I got to do, I didn't do my inversions today. All the answers come in the music. Once you get to a certain level, all the answers come in the music. For me, it's working on material. Now, if it were an actor, you know, actor fills up time. A musician fills up time. You know, a graphic artist might fill up space. You know, but you start with honing 3 minutes of material, 5 minutes. Do you have a tight 10? You know, okay, that's one result-oriented approach, and the other is to live it and let the instrument tell you what you need to work on. Of course, the fundamentals, but anything that you learn in music, even if it's a scale, say, oh gosh, I don't know anything about, but I just learned the scale. Well, it's up to you to bring you to that event. Make music with that thing. Whatever simple device you learned. Music is not something to wrap your head around. It's not an intellectual pursuit. It's something to create with. So it's not how much you know. That's meaningless. It's totally insignificant. Because Wes Montgomery didn't know anything about chordal harmony and triad pairs and contrary motion, blah, 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 all this sophisticated, beautiful subjects that we can talk about and we can go on, and it's all beautiful, but he made music. So it's what you know is insignificant. What you do is everything.
That's good.
So even if it's something simple, you make music with it. Let me see what I can do. I've got a scale. Can I find Happy Birthday? Can I find or a melody that's in my head? But if I can't find Happy Birthday, but I'm racing up and down the neck with a 3-octave arpeggio or a 3-octave scale, and I can't find Happy Birthday among those notes, something's out of balance. And that's the whole secret, is balance. Wherever you are, you got to find the balance. So I'm not saying that, not to know anything. Of course you want to know more, but you have to let what you know. If it doesn't feed your creativity, you're not using your knowledge, and that's a waste of space, brain space. If you're just carrying shit around and you're not putting it to use, that's luggage you don't need to be carrying.
Yeah, that's a good analogy there.
I'm full of them.
I know. I love it. Wow. That's amazing, man. That's good stuff. I could just hear you all day. And this is the same kind of magic that you you do with your music. I don't know if to the listeners out there, you know, must dig into Sid's music, because when he plays, it's like you're immediately in this musical trance, you know. And that's one thing I really love about you, Sid, is like when you play, you really, just like you're talking about, you know, you're really in the music just for it, you know, just really there and really making it come to life. It's like you said, like we can play all these scales and not find happy birthday. I guess a good question for you then would be, how do you, I don't know, what do you think about this, or what would you say for bringing the music to life? Because sometimes people really squeeze the life out of music, I think. And I think that's very sad, and it's not the point, and that's kind of what you're saying. So yeah, how do you, what advice do you have to like really bring music to life, you know?
Well, I one thing to do, even if it's a classical piece, you know, is to make it your own, like reinterpret it, you know. You played a very beautiful version of Jimmy Weibel's Etude, and
Thank you.
I loved hearing it. I love hearing his music, and Jimmy gave me all this music, and so I have the what he wrote as far as the etudes that he played. But when you hear the recordings of him playing the etudes, he's not even playing his own music the same way, you know. And I asked him about, well, you know, in the etude, this whole introduction that's as long as the etude wasn't there. He said, oh, I was just, you know, noodling around. So he made his own music. Of course, making your own music your own is sounds redundant, but he wasn't handcuffed to a particular way of playing every time. He made every time he played fresh, and even you know, even his pieces that had specific fingerings and specific moves. So there was a balance between the improvisation and the offering, kind of like a storyteller. Storyteller knows the story, but it's going to have a different embellishment each time he tells it. You know, because he's connected to the thing itself, the meaning of the story, rather than, you know, where is my tongue going to be when I approach this word?
Right.
You know, those are things that maybe a technician might be overly might pay too much attention to, and a storyteller will just tell the story, and it's going to be different every time. You probably couldn't play it the same way every time. It would be impossible. So that type of approach, I mean, so that truth informs my approach, and you know, that would be, I even forgot what the question was, but I think it has
just bringing the music
bringing
to
life to music. Yeah,
telling the story.
That's it. It has to be alive. You have to, you know. And the only thing that's the same all the time is something dead. Life can't repeat itself. Nature hasn't made anything the same way twice. No duplications in nature. No two flowers, no two snowflakes, no two humans. So you bring it to life by letting it not be dead. You know, make it your own.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'll just ask one more question, and that's just if you have any advice to anyone who's on the path to mastery. I always ask this question. I know you've already answered all the things in such a great way, but if you have any advice someone who is on a path, just dedicated to life or to music for their whole life, for the love of music, you know, just for that reason, like you wake up and it's always there. Like, what do you have to say to the young people or to anyone who's dedicated to a life of music?
Congratulations. I mean, if all you want to do is play music and you wake up feeling and hearing music, and that's your life, then beautiful. Because I know some musicians don't have that. So that's a good place to be. Keep it up. You know, if all you want to do is play, then now's your chance.
Yeah, especially right now.
It's always now. And now is always here.
That's right.
Now always has been here. So, yeah, just do it. And if you're not worried about getting to the next level, and you just do it for the love, time takes care of the rest, and you can't rush time. So just bring the love, and the time takes care of the rest, and live it.
Yeah.
It's alive. So join into the life that's already there. Consciousness is already here. Dive in.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sid.
Great talking to you. This is it's nice to reconnect after all these years.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Don't be a stranger, or at least not any stranger than you already are.
Oh, I'll try not to. That's awesome. Thanks so much, Sid. Guys, everybody check out Sid's. Thank you. Everyone check out Sid's music, sidjacobs.com, right? You're offering many cool things on there. I've seen a lot of amazing musical art.
I'm not in charge of that, but yeah, I don't do any of the self-promotion, but someone who is helping with that, and God bless them.
Yes.
Because I think shameless self-promotion is redundant.
All right. Well, cool. Well, thanks so much, Sid, and have an amazing day. We'll see you later.